During the great battles of the First Age, Fingolfin, King of the Elves, decided to go one-on-one with Morgoth. That's kind of like Lord Sauron's dad. They fought, and then Morgoth got the upper hand and crushed him under his foot. But in one last-ditch effort before he died, Fingolfin stabbed the incarnation of evil in the foot, permanently injuring him. But before Morgoth could cast him into the pits, Borundir, King of the Eagles, flew in to rescue him. Yep, that seems to be pretty good for my Lord of the Rings script. I'll just call Amazon real quick. Hello, I'm Amazona. I work for Amazon. How can I help you? Hello, Amazona. I have a Lord of the Rings script for you. Oh, I'm sorry. We just got one of those last week. Oh, well, okay. Can you tell me who's writing it? Sure, that would be J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay? Who?
The mirror shows many things. Things that were, things that are, and some things that have not yet come to pass.
You know, we've worked on a lot of movies that didn't get made that, you know, in our judgment should have.
Tackling something like this.
Pure ignorance, sheer stupidity, and wild recklessness.
And then came the challenge of making it, which was the creative adventure of a lifetime.
Yeah, and you're following, obviously, the books, you're following Jackson's and everything else. But when you guys went into it, was it important for you guys to kind of almost go into it with a clean slate to think, right, we're going to tell our story?
No, really, I mean, what's nice is that Lord of the Rings is the star. You know, like Tolkien is the star.
You know, it's not our story.
And of course, this kind of epic story also requires visual effects, and we have those.
I know what it is you saw. For it is also in my mind.
You would have a queen, not dark but beautiful and terrible as the dawn, stronger than the foundations of the earth. All shall love me and despair.
The story behind the Rings of Power. Or, hey guys, I fixed the Rings of Power. Also, I talked about a bunch of stuff. Or maybe just, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, from Fellowship of the Ring to Return of the King, is a grand masterpiece. I met this girl who has an annual family gathering where they marathon the extended edition of Lord of the Rings back to back while eating popcorn and pizza. It's already a beloved classic after just 21 years. In contrast, Peter Jackson's The Hobbit trilogy was a bloated, boring, nonsensical, CGI-filled, cash-grabbing train wreck. Quite unlike the book, which was a short, endearing, concise book. However, The Hobbit has since been salvaged in two ways. One is this fan re-edit, which compresses the three movies into a single movie, as it should have been, cutting everything down to what mattered, rearranging a few scenes, and removing a vast amount of the unbelievable nonsense that they shoved in just to, I don't know, add spectacle? The other way to salvage The Hobbit, which took far less effort, was a theory proposed by my brother after we watched the last one, The Battle of the Five Armies. You see, at the end of the movie, there's this scene where Bilbo is writing everything down in a giant book, and he's satisfactorily adding the last words to the page as he narrates over. This book is the Hobbit trilogy. A book written by Bilbo, which is why it includes so many bizarre things. Bilbo just isn't a very good writer, and he wasn't really trying to write out a perfect record of events anyway. He was writing a grand, epic adventure, and maybe he has some memory issues. He sort of just, made up the whole Battle of the Five Armies because he was, unconscious for that, so, of course, none of what happened made sense. But how can this be used to salvage Amazon's Rings of Power, or as many people are calling it, Rings of Prime? Well, you see, the biggest problem with the show is that it is just simply boring. None of the characters are compelling, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. That's not one thing.
But you have not seen what I've seen.
I have seen my share.
You have not seen what I have seen. Let us say that all is as you fear, and this enemy is out there somewhere, lying in wait. If you are wrong,
I'm not
if
wrong.
you are wrong, will you lead more elves to die in far-off lands?
It's just not that interesting. The story around it is interesting. There's like a ton of people ranting about it because the show's just not that enjoyable. It's nothing you want to pass on to your kids or pass on to your anyone. It's not the kind of show you'd recommend, I guess, is a good way of putting it. And a massive contrast to that is the show Arcane, which is one of the best shows of all time. Look, seriously, look at the ratings for Arcane. Yeah, this video is not about Arcane, but look, Arcane's got a 10 out of 10. It's got a 10 out of 10. What show uncontroversially has a 10 out of 10? Anyway, this video is not about that show. This video is about Rings of Power and the simplest solution to it, which is the time-traveling Eowyn theory. Why can't we just do this, okay? Say that there are multiple timelines. Okay, one of the timelines is the Hobbit timeline, because clearly the Hobbit timeline and the Lord of the Rings movies timeline and the books are all different because they all contain different things, especially the Hobbit timeline with some nonsense. So, we have the Hobbit timeline. However, the Hobbit timeline eventually runs into a Lord of the Rings situation. However, in this Lord of the Rings situation, the Eowyn of the Hobbit's timeline gains superpowers when she defeats the King of the Ring Wraiths. I forgot what his name is. She defeats this guy, and then she gains psychic powers. Now, why does she gain psychic powers? Because she needs to be able to time travel into the past, but when she time travels, she doesn't time travel into the past of that universe. She time travels into an alternate universe where she then possesses Galadriel. Now, why is she possessing Galadriel? Well, it's so that we can explain how any of this stuff happens. And that's the thesis of this video. Time traveling Eowyn should be canon for 3 reasons. 1, it makes the tone of the show ridiculous.
The table. We reserve its use for the most sacred purposes. Monuments or tombs to our honored dead.
We shall have to send it home with you so it can be treated with the proper respect.
You made it up, didn't you?
This has been wanting a new table for years.
I love Turin.
You can have Durin stealing a table. That's hilarious in this version, because this version is like far along down the oddball track. It can just be completely bizarre if it wants to.
I have not been truthful, but I did not know it.
How? I'm saying, how? Like, how?
Without being disrespectful. It can just be a fun parody, an homage, and it can be its own thing with its own type of humor, divorced from Lord of the Rings.
Nobody tosses a dwarf.
Secondly, this allows for suspense because we no longer know what is going to happen in the future. The future could be at risk because time-traveling Eowyn went into another universe and messed with all the time stuff, so who knows what's going to happen. Thirdly, this allows the writers to do something that I think they really should be allowed to do, which is write their own dang story with their own dang characters and make them interesting.
They're trying to hit this middle ground where they are true-ish to the source material while taking some creative liberties to fill in the gaps to make it a TV show. At this point, I wish they had just gone completely in the we're making something pretty new here territory.
With that last thing being the most important and emphatic thing. Please make your characters interesting, writers. Make us care about them. Please actually do it. Actually, you know what? Thing number 4, the writers should take a writing class. I know that doesn't make sense with the format of this list. I don't care. The writers need to take a basic writing class. Like, look at this. This shows every scene in episode 1. The green ones lead into each other. The red ones just come out of nowhere. Like, you should not have plots that look like this. They should lead into each other at least somewhat. Like, come on. So what kind of bad writing does this theory explain, and why is the idea of a time-traveling Eowyn from an alternate universe more reasonable than what we are actually supposed to believe is happening in this show? First of all, Galadriel climbs onto a boat. That's basically the entire justification for this theory. So, she took up a vow to kill Sauron, but she's getting onto this boat, which characterizes her as not wanting to kill Sauron more than she wants to get onto this boat. But then when she's on this boat in the middle of the ocean, she decides that suddenly, no, she just wants to jump into the ocean. Now, this doesn't mean that she wants to kill Sauron, it just means that she wants to jump into the ocean for some reason. You see, if she wanted to kill Sauron, she wouldn't have gotten to this boat in the first place. Why did you write it like this? Two better options that actually keep her character consistent, that are very easy, that I literally thought of in like 10 seconds. One, have her choose to steal a boat and run off to kill Sauron because that's what she really wants. Or two, have her get onto the boat because she actually wants to go to Valinor, and then have the boat get hit by like a tsunami or something. Maybe not a tsunami, that might be a little drastic, but like have it get hit by something, and then she's in the ocean, and you have the exact same thing, you just don't have her jumping into the ocean. Because why? Why would you want to write your character choosing to jump into the ocean? So now you may be asking yourself, how the heck does a time-traveling Eowyn plotline added time alternate universe, how does that help salvage this scene? Well, it doesn't just salvage it, it makes it interesting and really cool. You see, what actually just happened was Eowyn possessed Galadriel. That's why she got on the boat. You see what happened, actually, I need to set up this quick plot point. You see, Eowyn, when she time traveled, she also time traveled an implanted memory, which is why this memory dream sequence thing at the beginning of the show didn't make a lot of sense. You see, what actually happened was Galadriel, you see, she took back control, and while she was in control, they got on the boat, but then Eowyn took back control once they were on the boat in the middle of the ocean through a last-ditch effort trying to reactivate that implanted memory of her brother by looking at the dagger, because that brother memory is actually Eowyn's memory, not Galadriel's memory, because actually this guy didn't exist in this timeline. He only existed in Eowyn's implantation mind thing in Galadriel's mind. Yeah. And if you think that that's kind of convoluted and nonsensical, remember this is coming from the Hobbit timeline's writing quality. And most importantly, explains the character's motivations in this moment, because what happens is there's two different people fighting, and when Galadriel takes control, she gets on the boat to Valinor, and then when Eowyn takes control on the boat, she decides to jump into the ocean, because it's better to jump into the middle of the ocean than to get brought off to Valinor and then expunged from Galadriel's mind. So they're in the middle of the ocean, they're both like angry at each other, and then they get saved. Lastly, this actually shows these a struggle. Look, guys, we have an inner conflict in the character. It's literally the character fighting with another character inside of them. Is this theory true? Was this part of their idea? No. But if this theory were canonicized, the people criticizing this show would be able to start enjoying the show. Like, recontextualization of past events can make things that were horrible good. And I think that the best way to salvage this show is to actually make it interesting, please, because it's just not. Anyway, that's just my thinking. That's my theory. Here's some basic storytelling from these guys, and the video's going to end as soon as you hear it.
Each individual scene has to work as a kind of funny sketch. You don't want one scene that's just like, well, what was the point of that scene? We've found out this really simple rule that maybe you guys have all heard before, but it took us a long time to learn it. We can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words "and then" belong between those beats, you're f***ed, right? So what I'm saying is that you come up with an idea and it's like, okay, this happens, right? And then this happens. No, it should be this happens and therefore this happens. But this happens, therefore this happens. And that, as soon as we are able to, and literally sometimes we'll have our beats and we'll say, okay, this happened, but then this happens, and that affects this, and that does to that, and that's why you get a show that feels like, okay, this to that, to this to that, but this, here's the complication, to that.
This happened, and then this happens, and then this happens. That's when you're in a movie just going, what the f*** am I watching this movie for? Just like, this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. That's not a movie, that's not a story.